Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna continue the story What If Naruto Was the Child of Dark Prophecy Part 3. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
6:30 p.m. Before Naruto got to Konoha, it had been 3 hours. The Haruno family, the district of the wealth, Konohagakure no Sato, country on fire. Ah, you must be Sakura's teammates. A woman with waist-length pink hair and smooth skin said to the kids in a seductive voice. She was used to using that voice to get what she wanted. Her child looked at her with suspicion, and the mother realized what was going on as she scratched the back of her head. Mabuki cleared her throat by placing a delicate hand over her chest. As she moved, her white casual short-sleeved shirt and red home dress moved with her. It didn't reach the ground very far, just a little bit below her knees. She said, "Please come in a much softer voice." Even though Sai and Minato Jr. were mostly robots, the 13-year-old boys gulped down a lot of air, which made the woman sweat and laugh nervously. Sakura moaned and pulled them both in by their ears so they would stop staring at her mom. Even though their female teammate told them to take off their shoes and line them up by the door, they didn't. Sakura knew that her mother couldn't help making knees weak and groins heavy, but that didn't mean she liked it when it happened to two people she thought of as friends. She called out from the door, "Can you and your friends help me set up the dinner table?" The door clicked shut when the woman shut it. Once the boys picked their tongues up off the floor, the girl shouted, "Yes, Mom," and led the boys to the living room. Everyone in Konoha agreed that Mabuki Haruno was a very beautiful woman. She had a heart-shaped face, beautiful teal-green eyes, a cute button nose, and perfect lips that were always painted a deep, seductive red. Every time she walked, a man would stand up right away. She had gotten far in the ranks of shinobi because of how pretty she was, but not by kneeling down and blowing pipes for a raise. Instead, she became a mistress of illusions. She was known as the shimmering pink flower. Mabuki was a great jounin, even though she wasn't very good at ninjutsu, and mostly learned taijutsu to protect herself. Even though she was pretty, she was said to never be able to keep a life partner. Each one was either too shy to disagree with her or too bold to take her ideas at face value. When she was an active kunoichi, she never really thought about relationships. Instead, she saw most of the men around her as ways to satisfy her never-ending need for sex. Minato Namikaze was different, though. In her eyes, he was a man who stood for everything good in the world, and she could see that he could never hurt anyone. Kushina and the woman with pink hair had fought many times over who was the better woman for him. In the end, the redhead won. Even though he was married, Haruno never stopped trying to get close to him. Minato broke her impression of him when he called her and a few others to his office, and told them that they were all going to be part of a fake retrieval mission. His children, Naruto and Naruko, had been taken by kidnappers, and they were going to try their best but fail. In reality, their godfather took them to Konoha to train them to be the best tools for Konoha. Why did he do this? The man didn't even try to hide the poison that was rising up in him. He hated with children with a burning passion. Contrary to what most people thought, Mabuki loved children. She had always wanted a child of her own, but when Tsunade found out that her womb was broken, she carefully ruled out having a child. Even though she always asked her sex partners to dump it in, Mabuki had a vague idea of what had killed her chances of having children. She didn't want to think about those things again. Because the Yondaime hated her, she quit being a kunoichi and became a councilwoman in charge of Konoha-born merchants who traveled. This was against the Yondaime's wishes. At the orphanage, the woman with pink hair found Sakura, a tiny little girl of 5 years old with a mop of dirty pink hair and bright green eyes that sparkled with intelligence. The girl looked so much like her that she felt like an angel had come down to answer her prayers for a child. Sakura was everything Mabuki had ever wanted in a child: smart, but not a prodigy, cute, and stubborn as a rock, but only when it came to living or dying, and Sakura had that in spades. Sakura was smart, but she wasn't a genius, so her proud mother wasn't surprised when her adopted daughter, like her, became Kunoichi of the Year. Even though the mother wasn't happy to hear that her daughter was having trouble making and keeping friends at the academy, she still had the will to hope. The woman was in her early 40s, but she was still close with her old teammates, so she counted on Sakura getting along with them. The woman swung into the room with a pot of shiny ramen in one hand and a pot of roasted pork meat in the other. She didn't like the food that her daughter's teammates had asked for, but she was happy that her child was making friends. The retired kunoichi put the pot in the middle of the table and spun around it, passing out food to the kids as she went, and leaving the smell of her rose petal shampoo in the air. It seemed like her every move was the same or very similar to what a professional ballerina would do. easy, natural, and in charge. Before they knew it, she spun on her toes and sat down gently in the chair at the head of the table. Sakura gave her a mean look and coughed hard. Mabuki stopped eating her ramen and looked at her daughter, who was simply pointing to the front door over her shoulder. The woman slowly lowered her fork of food. She was going to spend an extra hour in her private gym just to burn it out of her body, and grinned evilly. Sakura's green eyes stayed stubborn and determined. You should know, Sakura, that I like to eat food too. Poor girl, she was now coughing a lot. Gakahum. She made a sad face. Fine. If you need me. She sniffled and sharply looked away. I'll be organizing my underwear. Anyone want to join me? Mama, Mabuki cackled at how red-faced her daughter became. I was joking. She was about to leave, but stopped when the son of the Yondaime spoke. Lady Haruno. Yes, Minato Jr. Jr. is fine. Then please call me Mabuki. Lady Haruno was my mother's name. Sakura groaned and slumped into her chair in embarrassment. Ugh, Mama. The fourth Hokage's little blonde clone nodded. I wish to ask you some questions. But Junior, this is supposed to be a team dinner. No outsiders. Don't worry about her. She's just mad that she hasn't hit her growth spurt yet. This time, the girl didn't groan, but instead sat up and lifted her chin in defiance. She would hit the growth spurt when she was ready, damn it. Sai pursed his lips and looked to his teammate, then he said, "Is that so?" he asked. Suddenly, his empty eyes got way too amused, and his smile got too wide. He laughed when the girl looked at him with fire in her eyes and said, "I knew something was wrong, but I didn't think her lack of chest was it." While that was going on, her mother laughed into her hands. Junior shook his head. Just a few questions. She took a seat. Ask away. The boy wasted no time. What happened on the retrieval mission you went on 10 years ago with the Yondaime, Ibiki Morino, and Inoichi Yamanaka? Can I have the details? The mission had happened 13 years ago and it was still as S-rank as it ever was, but Junior removed the file from inside his jacket and placed on the table, beside his food. Is it true that you, and I quote, accidentally cast an illusion over Minato that threw off his aim? She tightened her lips and tried not to harden her eyes because the boy looked so much like his father. He didn't behave like Minato Sr., but he was as critically as his father. Well, after that, there was a very loud silence. The retired Jounin's eyes grew as big as dinner plates, and she leaned back a little without meaning to. I'm sorry, I have to go, she said, getting up and rushing out of the room. Junior narrowed his eyes. Was that sin? Sai and Sakura looked at each other, and the boy kept his eyes on where Haruno's mother had been sitting. After 2 hours and 20 minutes, the Death Forest, the Rinnegan could find almost nothing that was hidden. The king of the Rinnegan stopped in front of the forest's gates. He bent his right knee and jumped quickly over the gate. As soon as he got inside, he saw a black tiger with red rings around its eyes. It was twice as big as a normal man. When it saw the eyes of the person who walked into the forest, it ran away and meowed like a cat that had just lost its food. The king laughed and started to walk forward. He was a single teenager with red hair, and the most evil eyes the animals had ever seen. It looked like his whole body glowed with a strange black light, drawing people's attention but making them too afraid to get close. Soon, the trees got too close together for the dim moonlight to shine through and light up his path. But Naruto's eyes shone in the dark, which made every leaf and tree within 20 feet of him tremble and bow towards him. The world got brighter in his eyes, and the green spots of light inside the trees, which were their nature chakras, gave him the light he needed to move forward. He stopped before a tree with absolutely no green light flowing in it, and he placed his right palm on the trunk before him. There was a long, low hiss as his hand pushed forward. His eyes lit up with joy as the whole tree fell apart, revealing a 10-foot-long metal cylinder that looked to be about 4 feet wide, which is about how wide the tree was before it was cut down and used as a cover. Leaves and pieces of bark on the ground moved out of the way as he pushed forward. The hissing noise kept going until a seal came to life under his palm. He had a burst of fire under his hand, but he didn't laugh out loud. Under Naruto's palm, a clear, fairly flat bubble of light blue energy formed over the seal where the fire was. The flat bubble steadily increased as the defensive seal kept pumping out more and more fire to scorch the intruder. There was no doubt the base was on fire with alarms, but he didn't really care, until the flat bubble became as large as his palm before he compressed it all into a single spinning ball of death that bore a close resemblance to a jutsu his father created. When the king moved the ball forward, the seal broke in a beautiful shower of red and yellow sparks. A terrible grinding, cracking sound broke through the deathly silence of the forest as the king pushed the contained ball of concentrated fire onto the door of the hideout. When the locks broke from the intense heat, a large panel about as tall as him opened up. He kept pushing with the fire in his hand until the door exploded outwards, sending it down a long flight of stairs into the blackness of nothing. Naruto pulled back his hand and held the orb of gathered fire, held together by the chakra-draining/containing ability of the Predapath of his Rinnegan. Before he threw the ball of super-compressed, super-hot fire into it, the black man with red eyes looked down the stairs. Like a torch, the ball went up into the air and lit up the dark. Naruto looked over his shoulder and multiple bursts of smoke later stood 5 grotesque-looking centipedes that wound as long as 20 feet with dripping poisonous teeth and Rinnegan eyes. The creatures with many legs gathered in front of the door and wrapped their bodies around it as Naruto walked in. Their armor-like bodies blocked the exit, but 2 stood in front of the door to stop anyone who found a way to get past them. Naruto didn't want any survivors. The Predapath's suppressed bubble of fire lit up his path down the stairs. He hesitated at the top of the stairs, not sure if he should just fly down to meet the hundreds of ninjas waiting for him. Shimura Danzo, a proud man who wouldn't back down, stood behind them. He ultimately decided not to, not because his eyes couldn't handle using more than 2 paths of the Rinnegan at a time. He could use all the paths if he wanted, but rather he wanted to enjoy this opportunity to erase one of the people he most hated in the world. He remembered very well that Shimura Danzo always came to check on him and his sister while they were in sound so that Orochimaru could train them. The old man never failed to remind them that it was one of his dreams to one day have them as his tools as well as to become Hokage. So what if he had to kill Minato to do it? Naruto started to walk slowly and carefully down the long set of stairs. He and his sister, Naruko, hated the man with a passion because he stood by and supervised their torture and training. They also didn't like him because Danzo talked openly about his plans to become Hokage, even if that meant killing Minato. That made both of them dislike him even more. They were planning to kill their dad. His sensory abilities allowed him to sense the increasing number of people waiting for his arrival. He focused even more and discovered that the network of tunnels was gradually becoming emptier since the people were waiting for him, except those that waited in a large, separate room, possibly as support. Root was an illegal organization that was founded by the old Warhawk himself, and Sai was a member of this organization. The king could still remember what he told the 2 5-year-olds 7 years ago, even though it had been 4 months since he and the other former slaves had left Sound. He had just sent spies to the other main villages and a few other countries. He chose to use children because he planned for them to work their way up the rankings of the village and gain trust from the grassroots, garnering a good reputation and great trust among people. A smaller reason he used children most was because he had a distrust for adults, and this was understandable. Though as months went by with his people, he excluded the adults of his kingdom and those that served him on the ground. There were only a few adults among his spies, but they were mostly to work among the civilians. Even though they had important jobs in other countries, Naruto made sure to call them all back, a few at a time, so they could get their rank under armor based on how skilled they were. The ninjas mostly got silver ranks, while the civilians got bronze forearm, shin, and shoulder pads that could blend into the background. Sai and his other spy were both silver ranked, and they always hid their underwear so it looked like their skin under their regular clothes. They were proud of their position. Yes, he did remember what he told the 2 good kids. I want you to be my eyes and ears in Konohagakure. I want you to gain as much trust as possible among the people. You will support each other and be friends with each other, but if this gets in the way of your cover, then keep your friendship a secret. Your loyalty to me should also be a secret. Do you both now know what it means to be my spies? Yes, sir, was the answer. If life in their cages as slaves had done anything for them, it was force them to grow up. Among the many that had swarmed around their new leader, hoping to be picked to serve as his spies, Naruto chose them because of their zeal. We will not disappoint you. I hope you won't. If there are any problems, don't be afraid to call me or the division heads. If things get too dangerous, we'll get you out. Thank you very much, sir. He led them into the village and dropped them off at the orphanage. The other spy was technically the first one to be taken in. Sai was one of the people Danzo had brought back to his root base to be his agents. Sai had been missing for a few years, but his other spy kept him up to date on what was going on. When Sai resurfaced, Naruto was made aware that the boy, then 11 years old, had risen through the root ranks and was now among the 3 right-hand men for Danzo. Why had Danzo's brainwashing not worked on Sai? The answer was very simple. Both spies were fanatically loyal to Naruto, much like everyone in his kingdom. This had kept their minds on track. The root agent was on a secret mission to Hidden Mist to look into a traveling salesman's claim that the village was now run by a great kingdom with powerful warriors and a king who was as revered as a god. It was minutes after his dinner that he had been sent on the mission by Danzo. The king could hear the younger teen's deep regret that he wasn't there to meet him. but Naruto reassured him that it was okay. All he needed to know was where Danzo was. The boy went above and beyond by telling Naruto where all 5 entries and exits of the hidden base was, the approximate size, and the exact number of ninjas currently in the base. Some route had gone on a separate mission to Demon Country to steal an old artifact, but everyone else was still in the base. Sai's team was on its way to Kiri. The information was more than enough for the Rinnegan King. Naruto stopped 10 steps above the ground floor and moved his floating fireball far behind him in his mind. The orb grew into a big bubble that blocked their way out. It also sent light down to shine in the dimly lit area and block their way out. He looked over the still bodies of all the white masked root ninjas and saw an open door leading to a bigger room with even more ninjas waiting. The redhead smirked darkly. The black with red ringed Rinnegan pulsed and all the bodies of the ninjas in the area locked up, standing stock still and in attention. He lifted his right hand, palm open and facing the ground, and their feet followed. They couldn't even move their bodies to fight against his strong hold. When his hand was shoulder level and suddenly closed his hand into a light fist, and all of the levitating ninjas shot together into the middle of the room, crashing against each other in a floating ball of limbs. Then Naruto tightened his grip on his fist, and the force of gravity became too strong for any human body to handle. Blood exploded from their bodies and painted the walls and ground red, though never meeting the master of the Rinnegan. The bodies kept getting crushed together. As bones broke, loud cracks rang through the dark area and shot through the air in the room behind them. Naruto's smile twitched up, but only a little as he increased the power of the air around them. This finally led the ball of bleeding flesh to turn into thick red paste, full of human bones and fairly intact organs. Naruto flicked his hand over his shoulder and sent the ball of blood into the orb of fire behind him, commanding the thick black smoke to blow it up the flight of stairs so that the smell wouldn't irritate him. When the blood was done going into the ball of fire controlled by Predapath, it fizzled and sputtered and came out as nothing but thick, smelly air. He thought that the animals in the forest would smell it and come to find out what was going on. He had asked for it. The ball of fire kept bubbling but never poured out of the containment sphere. This was because it wasn't controlled by the Diva Path, which controlled attractive and repulsive gravitational forces, but by the Preta Path, which gave Naruto the ability to take as much chakra as he wanted from anywhere or anyone, as well as many other skills. Naruto began his walk to the other root ninjas. I'll enjoy this. Needless to say that regardless of the ruthless training regimen of the ninjas, they were very much unprepared to face the might of the Rinnegan King. He had no idea that the chase would be so funny. After he walked into the room with the next group of root agents with his arms crossed and his Rinnegan eyes shining with hidden humor, waves of black ninjas crashed down on him in a flurry of metal and limbs to kill the person who had broken into their base. When they were close to him, about 3 feet away, the world spun to a slow crawl until it moved much slower than a pregnant snail. He could see every one of the men and women with blank masks who were trying to kill him. He was able to count exactly 65 root operatives. The teen uncrossed his arms but kept his and his shoulders hunched over as his arms disconnected from his shoulders for the briefest of moments. He turned his head down and looked at the ground. His red, shaggy hair fell over his eyes, making them look very dark. Quick as a flash, he opened his eyes, and his Rinnegan flashed powerfully. It was so strong that, even though everything stopped, there was a fast thud around his feet, which was heavily stifled so that Konoha wouldn't feel it, but the whole base did. He lifted both of his arms, fists tightly clenched and facing his sides. Then, bright blue, scorching hot lasers shot out of his fists all around him. He moved his hands as he shot the lasers around, cutting through each shinobi with ease, until he suddenly stopped, brought his arms back to his body, crossed his forearms over his chest, and closed his eyes to focus. As Naruto opened his eyes and threw his arms wide, the world started moving again at its usual speed. Great push. The whole riddle shinobi around them gasped out blood from out of their mouths in the shock they could not hold down. The air around Naruto vibrated violently and surged outwards in a bubble of extra thick air, throwing the root ninjas back and into the walls with enough force to bash their brains and their skulls into mush. A few, though, shot out of the room and into the next one, which was as big as the stadium where the Chunin exams were held. They ran into their shocked teammates and died quickly from the many small holes in their bodies. Every step the Rinnegan King took sent terrible tremors through the base, but they couldn't be felt in Upper Konoha because of the seals that held the place together. The thudding became louder and heavier as he approached the arena until it stopped abruptly with him standing at the door with his hands to his side. He looked at the gathered, nervous ninjas, who numbered around 70, and were as far away as 25 feet. All of them stood in fighting stances, tightly gripping their weapons or their fists. It was quiet for a while, but then, kill him. A voice he suspected was Danzo's reverberated around the whole fighting area. Naruto smiled and ran toward them in a classic ninja run, with his head down and his arms flailing behind him. They also ran toward him. As he got close to them, he jumped up high and landed in the middle of the fight. He swung his fist and hit a shinobi in the face, knocked over a sword, which cut the throat of another ninja, and gave the swordsman a spinning kick that sent him flying across the room. The king blocked a blow with his right hand and pulled the root closer. He then tripped the root with a smooth sweep of his legs, causing him to fall on his face. The king then used the root's limp body as a shield against a deadly fire jutsu. Naruto threw the dead ninja in his grips away and drove his fist again into the torso of another, making blood blast out of his mouth. The ninja who held the Rinnegan kicked another ninja in the left knee, breaking it, and then pulled the other ninja behind him to use him as a shield against a barrage of shuriken. He drove his elbow up the chin of a ninja, grabbed the face of another one that thought his back was open and brought it down to meet the ground in an earth-trembling slam. His palms raced forward and palms struck the chest of 4 root operatives, leaving deep dents above their hearts, and he allowed them to fall as he faced other black ops. As he moved smoothly under 7 sword blows that threatened to cut off his head, his Rinnegan eyes flashed many times as he quickly looked around. This time, he wasn't slowing down time in his eyes. Instead, he was using his ability to see chakra and his limited ability to predict an opponent, like the Sharingan. His eyes flipped around without him turning his head to look behind him as well. 7 times in half a second, the incredibly powerful Rinnegan in his eyes pulsed, flashing over the 60 or so ninjas who were still there. The king clenched his fist and stepped on a ninja's foot with enough force to flatten it. He then threw the screaming ninja over his head and into the ceiling like an arrow. The man's body hung like a grotesque chandelier. He grabbed hold of the flak jacket of a ninja that came at him with a kunai wrapped with 3 seal bombs, a mass suicide attempt because the tremendous blast would take out dozens around him in the process. He ripped the blade out of his hand, took out 2, and shoved them into the ninja's mouth, breaking his mask in the process. He then cracked the ninja's elbow to shut him up and hit him in the heart with a heart-stopping punch, sending him flying away as he threw the kunai in the opposite direction behind him. Boo. Even though the arena was very well lit, the light still blinded people who weren't ready for it and blew apart people who were in the blast radius of both bombs. He slid away a small step and his foot cracked against the head of a root ninja that attempted to ambush him from beneath him, breaking his neck cleanly, and with another kick he decapitated him and the flying head bashed into the head of another shinobi. He moved his shoulder to the side and dipped his fingers into the shuriken pouch of his last attacker with blurring speed that was much faster than the man. He grabbed a fistful of standard shuriken and jammed his fingers into the neck of the person he took the shuriken from, cutting his neck bone cleanly. He brandished the shuriken in his fingers and peppered them in a small crowd of ninjas. Naruto puffed out a breath and stood up straight again. His Rinnegan looked around and he smirked at the dead bodies surrounding him, bleeding corpses that were twisted in painful positions. More than a few of them were headless or were scorched from the bomb. The king dusted down his red shirt with his metal-armored fingers and continued his steady walk towards a stunned Danzo, who after witnessing one teenager take out a room of about 86 professional, highly trained root ninjas began to seriously question his own chances. The man stumbled away from the eerily calm bearer of the Rinnegan, never really taking a good look, much to Naruto's disappointment. The elder hobbled into the other room with his cane, and Naruto followed him at his own pace. He still had about 10 minutes until the King of Hell fully healed his sister, and the monkey and drill-beaked bird summons were still keeping a close eye on them. He could even see through their eyes, which would have been a great disadvantage given that he was very busy at the moment, but he could switch to as many fields of vision he wanted without disrupting his own normal vision. He wanted to bring back his sister so much it was painful, but he also wanted one of the top 5 most hated people in his list to suffer terror before he died. The master of the Rinnegan picked up a sticking-up tanto with his right hand and twisted it in his fingers. He then flicked it to his right, sending the dried blood off of it. His obsidian boots, connected to the equally black armor under his clothes, splashed through the small puddles of blood and then the black scuff marks caused by one of the bombs. He slashed across 2 ninjas and stepped over their leaking bodies. His new weapon shot forward and sliced through the heart of a ninja. He unsheathed his blade and pushed the dead ninja aside. His left hand came forward and grabbed a ninja by his neck as he fell down from the ceiling. His blade blurred forward into the root ninja's stomach an uncountable number of times as Naruto stared deeply into the dying man's eyes through the eye holes of the other's mask. He threw the man, who was bleeding heavily, over his shoulder and threw the tanto in front of him. It cut through the hearts of 4 ninjas and pinned a 5th one to the wall. He walked around the lifeless shinobi to Danzo. The one-eyed elder had finally found his bravery and stood in the very last training ground, his eyes looking down on the far superior eyes of the king. The elder was standing a few short feet away from the wall. Naruto stopped 10 feet away from him and cocked his head to the side. "Do you know who I am?" The man narrowed his eye, then they became slightly wide. "I thought you had passed away. I still have a lot to live for." The council elder glared. "Then you should not have come here, brat." Naruto opened his arms, motioning at the carnage that he had left in his wake. "I thought this would be more than enough to calm your pride, but I shouldn't be surprised because you've always been a fool," he said, and his black eyes with red rings lit up as he finished. Danzo snarled and clenched his walking stick, pointing it at Naruto, and a short blade slid out of the base. "You still do not know what respect means, even after all the conditioning. I knew I should have pressed harder to take you and your sister from that vile snake," he spat, getting angrier at the small smile on Naruto's face. Naruto shook his head in exasperation. "We both hated you, you know, me and my sister. We wanted to hang your guts all over Konoha and dance on your heart. You both were and still are weak." Then a realization hit the old war hawk and he smirked evilly at Naruto. "Oh yes, that filthy sister of yours was killed, was she not?" Suddenly all the amusement left Naruto's godly eyes and the teen slowly cocked his head to the side, staring at the older man with hollow eyes. "I watched the video of that snake slicing her throat. Your screams were simply amusing." He licked his lips and Naruto remained still, though his Rinnegan glowed even brighter, and the lights around dimmed a little, though the man did not notice since he was too invested in his story. "The funniest part of that was when she said you shouldn't worry about her." The man chuckled in a deep voice, the sound resonating around the room full of corpses. The red rings around the king's eyes got cloudy, and his lips twitched down. "She was more worried about what would happen to you than to herself. Only a naive child would do that." He coughed as an invisible hand wrapped around his throat. He hacked and clawed at his neck, dropping his cane as he did so, but struggled even more when he felt no physical hands choking him. Naruto walked up to the man who was gasping for air and forced Danzo to his knees. Danzo had to use his hands to keep his body from falling to the ground. "You just called my sister naive." His right foot shot forward and hit the elder on the chin. The elder's head bounced off the wall and hit the ground. "She was the light of my life." His voice became deeper with each word he spoke, shaking the underground bass heavily. This time he kicked the elder's chest and the man grunted out a choke as he again crashed into the wall, and back onto the ground. "She was my soul." He kicked the man's chest again and Danzo smashed into the wall once again and fell onto his face, almost lifeless. Naruto grabbed the back of the elder's head and lifted him off the ground. His eyes were more than angry. "Your soul will be the price I pay to get her back. You should be glad your worthless existence would bring back my angel." The holder of the Kyuubi's chakra drove his fist into the man's stomach, never releasing the gravity hold around the older man's neck, and bashed the man's weakened body against the wall hard enough to leave a dent. The limp body of the former head of the now defunct underground organization slowly lifted into the air, and followed after Naruto as the teen flew out of the base towards the cemetery. As the wind blew hard against the teen's cheeks, Naruto tapped his ear and told the centipedes that were wrapped around the tree to let the forest animals into the base so they could eat the dead ninjas. "Patch me over to Sai." "Yes, my lord," he heard a low voice say after a second. "Sai here, my lord." He could hear the root ninja fall onto one knee from the dry leaves that crinkled around him. "I want you to kill the root operatives with you. Find as many as possible and kill them as well. Make sure you take care of their bodies. I give you 3 days. That would be more than enough, my lord Naruto. I swear on my life to finish this mission." He could hear the spy in Konoha pull a kunai out of his pouch with a smooth ping. "Will there be anything else, my lord?" "Yes, I want you to stay in Konoha to look after my brother. When the time is right, you and the other spy will meet up with those in the Akatsuki, but for now, don't act suspicious." He shot out of the organization's exit, signaling for the wild animals to rush in and take control of the newly made feeding ground. Centipedes vanished in 5 puffs of smoke, but Naruto kept flying with Danzo's body through the trees towards the Konoha graveyard. "Your wish is my command, my king." Naruto disconnected. He had a sneaking suspicion that Sai was already looking after his old teammates. The king skidded to a stop in the grave, tousling the ground and making a few of the tombstones tilt backwards at the force. Naruto didn't spare Danzo with a comfortable landing. The older retired ninjas' bodies soon came after and crashed into a tree. Naruto looked at the crumpled form of the once proud leader of Root. 2 monkeys came out of hiding spots around the King of Hell's head and grabbed him by the shoulders. Naruto's eyes narrowed as his Rinnegan saw the chakra network of the man. He nodded, and the monkey gripping Danzo's right shoulder reached over and ripped out the eye hidden under the white bandages, making Danzo's grunt loudly in pain. Again, Naruto nodded, and the other monkey pulled the wood release out of Hashirama's arm. This left Hashirama with only one arm and a lot of blood coming from where his eye used to be. Naruto frowned as he saw the seal lying in wait to activate after Danzo had died. Orochimaru was the one that gave Danzo the seal. He didn't care. Naruto looked at the King of Hell head, who was holding his sister's body, and clapped his hand. The sound rang through the cemetery like a death bell. He flipped through a set of 10 hand seals before ending with Ram. Outer Path, Samsara of Heavenly Life Technique. The same cloud of darkness that covered the head of the King of Hell swirled into sight again, and a single demonic red eye looked down on Naruto as a pure white head with no nose but with small Rinnegan eyes rose up from the ground behind Naruto, who still held the Ram hand seal. The great mouth of the head behind Naruto unzipped and opened wide, leaning its head back as if it was cackling to the heavens. The monkey summons dragged the limp body of the councilman to Naruto. Naruto used his left hand to grab Danzo's head. He did this by letting go of the hand seal and tilting his head down to look into the Warhawk's eyes. "Are you afraid, Danzo?" Before he could get a reply, he took off his hand, ripping out the soul of the Warhawk with it. Not wanting to waste any more time, Naruto lifted the soul in his hand and threw it into the mouth of Samsara of Heavenly Life. The darkness above the King of Hell made a happy humming sound. "Now that hit the spot, give her to me," Naruto ordered, and the Shinigami laughed. "Fine," he said, and he vanished in a swirl, leaving behind only a small ball of light. All the monkeys and the drill-beaked bird bowed as the soul drifted downwards and entered through the top of the King of Hell's head. Naruto allowed the head behind him to return back to the underworld. The king slowly approached the head, his breathing getting more hurried but his legs nervous to keep moving him forward. It was an hour now, and he knew her body was now fully healed. The mouth opened and the brightest, happiest purple eyes sparkled from the darkness in it. When Naruto saw them, tears came out of his eyes and ran down his cheeks. He also saw a familiar look in her eyes, which meant she knew who he was. He stopped where he was and tried to blink out the tears in his eyes. He rubbed at his tears with his wrist and froze when warm hands gently reached up and held his cheeks. He tried to hide the tears in his eyes as he looked up through his hair and saw a brightly smiling face. "Why are you crying, bro?" The girl that spoke looked to be about his age, with flawlessly pale white skin and straight long red hair that went down to her lower back, straight bangs over her forehead a bit above her sparkling, bright purple eyes, and two big strands of hair curving down longer past her chin as a fang-like fringe, framing her face delicately. Her face looked just like he remembered it, though she was a bit older. She had a small nose that wrinkled when she was angry or nervous and small lips that she could stretch out into a toothy smile. She wore a neat, armless red dress that flowed down just a bit above her knees, a dress that allowed her smooth skin to show in all its pale glory. Even though she had no shoes, she still went up to him like she had before. Naruto hunched his shoulders and looked down at the ground while sniffling, and not crying. The person made a tinkling sound when they laughed. She knew how stubborn they could be. "Yes, you were," she said. Her voice was smoother and a little deeper than when they were younger, but the Rinnegan King still knew it. Her body merely ran through the years she was supposed to be if she had been alive, 16 years old. She was exactly the same height as him with the same body type, the only difference being her waist-length straight red hair, and her more feminine bodily and facial features. She was shocked when Naruto wrapped his arms around her and hugged her tightly. "I missed you, sister," Naruto's brother said. And she smiled softly and hugged him back, nuzzling her nose into his neck and taking a deep breath. "I missed you too, bro," he said. The siblings sat down on the ground, prompting the King of Hell to return back to the underworld, and chatted happily with each other for the rest of the night. Naruto still had something to do in Konoha before he had to travel to Hidden Rain. But for now he wanted to catch up with his formerly dead twin sister. That night, a large, true smile spread on Naruto's face, mirrored on Naruto's face, as they talked and talked with their fingers laced together. A heavy grumble interrupted them and the girl blushed heavily as Naruto snorted at her embarrassment. "I mean, you've been dead for 7 years, she said, puffing out her cheeks. She watched as he took his right hand away from hers, opened a segment storage seal on his obsidian armored wrist, took out a scroll, and dropped it on the ground. He opened it with a light kick, and there was a lot of smoke. When his sister looked at the neatly arranged food on the scroll, which included roasted turkey, beef, salads, and a big stack of cinnamon rolls, she looked at him with wide eyes. This made him smile even bigger. Never in her life had she seen this much food. "Just in case," I said. She looked at him with teary eyes. "Thanks, dude." Don't worry about it. He let go of her hand, and she pounced on the food like a wolverine who was starving to death. Sunagekure no Sato, Naruto's godfather, always told Naruto and Naruto about his plans to make a special group of ninjas who would work for him as his enforcers. He called them his Sound Four. But the group was never really made because the Snake Man wanted to take his time choosing who would be in it. He chose to use 4 of the slaves he was brainwashing: Saken, Yukin, Kitamaru, Teuya, and Jiraibo. At that time, Naruto and his sister were both 8, and the chosen 4 were 6. The 3 boys were pretty easy to shape, but Teuya was known to have a very thick head and a stubborn attitude that was much worse than anything Orochimaru had ever seen. She would spit poison and scream hysterically if she was dragged into the conditioning room. She would never sit still to listen or watch those who tried to hypnotize her. It was amazing that she had kept this attitude for 2 years while the boys had given up after 6 months. Even so, the Snake Man wanted the girl to be loyal to him because he thought her strong mind would make her a good servant. To speed this up, he gave what he called the cursed mark of heaven to all 4 candidates. Dark brown eyes looked through a pair of binoculars, and the person who had them made sure she was lying still on her stomach with her whole body hidden under a camo blanket on the roof of an apartment complex. Her shady binoculars were looking out from a building in a way that made sure the sun didn't hit the glass eyes while still keeping her out of sight. Under the camo blanket was a girl who looked to be about 14 years old. She was wearing a NBU grade brown and white desert camo pants, a midriff light brown shirt, and shiny silver under armor from the tips of her fingers to the base of her chin to her toes, where she wore silver boots that looked heavy but were actually very light for the terrain. A long desert camo scarf wrapped around her mouth and nose kept the sand from getting into her nose. Her blood-red hair fell down to her shoulders, but a long, thin bang fell down between her eyes and touched her chin. White bandages were tightly wrapped around her forehead, but her hair didn't bother her as she squeezed her binoculars to get a closer look at her target. One of her 2 favorite weapons was next to her. It was a 7-foot-long black barrel with a handle and a trigger. It had a long, powerful scope at the top, a grip at the bottom close to the trigger, and 2 stands at the front, a foot away from the nozzle. At the side of the weapon were 3 cartilages full of 6-inch long blue and black sendon and another cartilage full of gold and red sendon. The second gun weighed 50 pounds, and that was without the powerful scope and the cartridges. It was made of strong irons and plastic, but the girl had been trained to handle it well. She even had a long brown bag to hold the weapon, which she usually slung on her back when she moved. Her master was doing well thanks to a plan Orochimaru had. He called it a sniper rifle, and it was the only one in the world. The silver-ranked spy of the King of Sukai was watching the Sand siblings as they sat in the Kazekitch's office and talked about what they had found out about the recently invaded countries. As Temari yelled and waved the letter in the air, the spy was able to read her lips. This King of Sukai sounds like a dangerous guy, but he's telling us to obey him. Gaara sighed and rubbed his forehead in a tired way. They had been in his office for 3 hours, yelling about what to do with the new piece of information they got from their ninjas in spring. The Sukai forces were one of the strongest he had ever heard of. It was a miracle that the king didn't order the deaths of everyone there, including his own people. That would have been a huge mess. Temari, sit down. The girl sat back in her chair in a bad mood and threw the crumpled letter to Gaara. So you're just going to lay down and let this guy walk all over you? I didn't say I'd lie down for anyone, but can you say you haven't heard what this man and his army of monsters can do? When people think their lives are in danger, they tend to exaggerate. Kankuro, who had been busy tinkering with one of his puppets, cut his sister off without looking at her. I was there, as you know. Both of his siblings stopped talking when they were reminded of this fact. After their brother returned from a simple rank escort mission to Spring and met the Sukai forces, he was never the same. He told them what happened to him. He was walking through the market before he had to go home. But then dark figures fell from the sky and surrounded him. Before he could pull out his puppet, he felt a vicious punch to the back of his head that knocked him to the ground but didn't kill him. He heard the soldiers around him say that they knew he was the Kazekitch's brother and that their lord Naruto would not be happy if an emissary of the sand was killed. So, they grabbed him by the arms and made him watch as they took over the village with little to no resistance. Temari and Gaara were worried because all Kankuro had been doing was fixing and improving his puppet arsenal. The puppet maker then said, one of the ninjas said that he didn't care if he had to soak the ground in blood, as long as it made their king happy. He would do it without hesitation. He slowly looked to his silent brother and sister with haunted and wide eyes. They laughed. They killed people like they were killing flies, and they laughed. Gaara honked. Kankuro, why don't you go rest at home? We can handle this. Here, the puppet maker dropped his tools. Handle this. 2 hours of arguing with the council and 1 hour of arguing without the council, and you're handling it. He stood up and put his foot down. No, I won't go home and rest. That monster is coming. I don't have time to rest. His body trembled with repressed emotion. The spy who was listening and smirked and thought good things about her king. Damn, sir, you've got this guy peeing in his fucking pants. She giggled under her breath and adjusted her binoculars. Even after 3 hours of spying, she wasn't tired. She had been through worse when she was training at the Tsukai Academy, like being buried in scalding hot sand by Orochimaru as an experiment. It was nothing to her. She felt a buzz in her ear, so she tapped it twice. Who is this? I'm fucking busy. Well, fucking busy, this is Shinakura, said the voice of the king's personal maid back to her in a smooth, almost amused way. The foul-mouthed girl smiled as she looked through her binoculars. Hey there, chick, how's it going? I'm good, oh, hey, I'm coming over to see you, the soul of the fox in human form said, already expecting the outburst. But the outburst was more muffled because the spy wanted to keep her presence a secret. What the hell? The girl said angrily, grinding her teeth to keep her voice down. You old as hell piece of beetle dung, why the fuck are you coming here? She didn't really hate Shinakura, but she was angry that the maid was closer to the king than she was, and this was a big sore spot for her. It was mostly because she didn't want the combat maid to make her lose her focus. The spy could almost feel the maid's pride as she said the next words. Our master sent me here to help you. Don't you dare lie to me with his name, she spit. I will never lie with master's name, the fox spat back, furious that the girl would even think that. She calmed down and straightened her clothes, which were the standard uniform for a platinum rank soldier of the Tsukai Kingdom, Combat Maids Department of the Civilian Division. The sneaky fox smirked. You're just jealous that master trusts me, she said, then gave an exaggerated pant. He lets me into more than just his confidence, little girl. Listen, you old hack. If master wanted me in his bedroom, all he had to do was ask. He even gave me my rank himself. Do you get me, you nasty ass-cum slut? Lord Naruto trusts me, she said, gripping the binoculars tightly. Now, if I see you here, you motherfucking whore in heat, then. Shinakura whispered then what? Into the red-haired girl's right ear, making the spy drop her binoculars and pull a senbon from her wrist to hold it to the higher-ranking woman's throat. The fox laughed and took the needle from the girl's hand, then stuck it into the roof under them. How did you get in here? The spy whispered, gritting her teeth in anger as she carefully picked up her binoculars and continued to watch the Sand siblings. The blanket she was lying on was made by the Fuinjutsu Division and the Espionage and Infiltration Division working together. It was thick but not heavy, and it let cool or warm air through, depending on the environment. It was full of small chakra-suppressing seals that perfectly hid the presence of anyone under it from detection and, for the most part, sensors. The material had 5 layers. The middle layer was where most of the seals were, and the outer layers were there to filter in the temperature and make the spy more comfortable. For example, it was now fairly cool under the blanket instead of being sweltering hot. The blanket was given to every Tsukai spy. Other standard equipment included binoculars, senbon launchers, senbon cases to hold the senbon, quick cooking ration packets, and a few other smaller things. Spies were trained to be experts at long range, which was what they were supposed to do. The rifle the girl was carrying was the only one in the world. Naruto wanted it to be that way because it would give the girl, who was secretly weak and insecure, a sense of individuality. Naruto knew what each of his people wanted and needed, and in order for them to serve him better, he needed to let them know that he could also care for them. Now, the Shinakura with the platinum rank had found a way under the blanket. The older redhead lay on her back and put her hands behind her head. She looked at the spy next to her with playful eyes. With magic. That's how. Don't fuck with me, you damn hack. I won't, was the sharp reply. Fuck you. I thought you had said I shouldn't. The maid covered her mouth when she heard a cackle because the blanket's noise-blocking seals were not airtight. The red-haired spy, however, was not amused. Just shut up and don't get in my way, she said. Since Naruto had sent her, she would have to deal with Shinakura. But seriously, is there anything to report? The spy was quiet until the older redhead poked her cheek. Teuya. The girl named Teuya hissed at the maid and looked at her out of the corner of her eye. They're leaning more toward ripping up the letter. Stupid dickheads. The fox nodded in agreement and relaxed a bit more. Does Lord Naruto want me to put them down once the letter is shredded? He told us to wait 6 days, or 5 days as of today, before we can take care of them. Didn't Division Head U of Espionage and Infiltration tell all spies the same thing? I might have zoned out here and there, the girl said. The fox didn't say anything about the girl's attitude. I heard you were with Lord Naruto in Lightning and Water Country, she said to pass the time as Kankuro's sister hit him on the head with a battle fan because he was getting so dark and sad. Yes, Master was very powerful. All 3 countries bowed to him. They should, Teuya said. The simple truth was that everyone in the Tsukai Kingdom was loyal to their king, and Teuya wasn't an exception. When she refused to bow to Orochimaru and fought hard against being controlled like a puppet, she worshipped the ground her master and hero walked on. The girl had spent 3 years in the Tsukai Kingdom's academy learning from the best teachers. She chose to be a spy because she thought it would best serve her master, since spies were the ones who gave the kingdom useful information that made it stronger. Either that or she applied to be a maid or work in intelligence, but she couldn't do either because she wasn't good at keeping a place clean. Her apartment in Suna was proof of that, and she wasn't patient enough to sit through classes on code breaking, encryption, computer science, and math. Also, spies were seen as an important part of the kingdom's army, and even though she was sent to Suna and had to leave for her job 2 years after graduating from the academy, she didn't regret her choice. Those 2 years helped her prepare for life in the desert and gave her some freedom, so she didn't regret her choice. I don't think Gaara's imperial defense can be taken down so easily, so you should probably take out Temari and her brother and leave Gaara for me. What makes you so sure that I can't handle him and his siblings? His defense is automatic, even after losing the 1 tails. The Senbin bullets in the cartridges were stronger than normal Senbin. They could cut through half a foot of solid lead and a few more inches of steel. The standard issue Senbin bullet for spies was not to be taken lightly. Even though the rifle could shoot at impossible distances that regular long rangers could only dream of, the bullet would still have a hard time getting through the sand defense. We want this mission to be done quickly and cleanly. We want to kill the leaders so that it's easier to control the followers. That means we don't have any room for a long, drawn-out fight, and we can't make any mistakes. They could have forced the fight far away from Suna, but for now they chose to do any assassinations on the spot and quickly. Yeah, I get it, the spy for the king of Tsukai said idly. So after that we can go back to the kingdom, right? When it's all said and done, Lord Naruto has already told the civilian division to get ready for another party after the world has been conquered. Teuya bit her bottom lip with excitement. The way things are going, that's going to happen for sure. Her fingers twitched on the binoculars because she was too happy and jittery to stay still. Lord Naruto sure knows how to make a plan. The maid completely agreed with the younger redhead. He has a plan for every possible outcome. The people of the kingdom thought their king was nothing less than a genius. They don't stand a chance, Teuya said with a wicked smile. What about the Jinchuriki, one of the moles from that S-rank organization? The Akatsuki told me when he was here that they have 4 beasts, and I heard that the 2, 3, and 8 tails are in the kingdom right now. King Naruto wants to get them to join his side, but if they refuse, all he has to do is seal them into people who are more willing to do so. And there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people willing to have the beasts sealed in them so they could better serve their lord. So the 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6 tails are going to be resealed, but the 2 and 8 tails have a chance to live. The maid asked. Damn, Shinekora laughed. I know. Teuya was about to say something else but stopped. She laughed and relaxed her arms, but she didn't take off the field glasses. They signed the fealty agreement scroll, and I was hoping to kill them, she sighed in disappointment. What next? We're supposed to stay until the 6.5 days are up and keep an eye on them. If they decide to tear up the agreement, we're supposed to take them down when the time comes, she said with a knowing look to the younger redhead. But don't worry, you can use your rifle or flute later if Master sends us to Fire Country or Earth Country. Both daimyos, Fire and Earth, had torn the letter up, along with the Tsuchikage, Unoki, and the Hokage, Minato. After they did this, they got a message, and the people who worked in the intelligence and interrogation division wrote them down and fed the information to Naruto as the list grew. At the same time, Hidden Star, Hidden in the Darkness, and Hidden Fang tore up their letters, but Chill, Marsh, Waterfall, and Hidden Tree, along with the daimyos of their respective countries, signed their agreement scroll. Teuya lovingly rubbed her hands over her gun. I want to use this puppy to blast holes in people for our king, she said, and they both nodded. Shinekora went back to talking about boring things, and Teuya went back to watching the Kage's office, the S-rank library in the Kage's mansion, the Hokage's house, Konohagakure no Sato, Fire County. You did what? A terrible scream shook the Kage's house. A bored voice replied to Jiraiya. I ripped it. The Toad Sage grabbed his famous spiky hair in his fists and pulled it. Why in the world would you do that? I don't make deals with the devil, Minato said. His bright blue eyes didn't even bother to look up from the scrolls piled up on his desk. He used his sealing brush to tap his chin. That monster needs to be taken down. The former teacher of the Hokage groaned and slammed his fist on the Yondame's table, sending more than a few pieces of paper flying and spilling the ink pot over the others. Why didn't you wait for Kakashi's report or for me to reply? The Namikaze stared at the older seal master. Last time I checked, I am the Hokage. I make decisions for this village. Me, not you, not the council, not even a fucking vote. Both men kept staring at each other. That is, until Jiraiya sighed and slouched into a chair. You don't understand, kid. Naruto has the Rinnegan, which is the strongest of the 3 Daijutsu, and the most powerful eyes on the planet. The eyes that can create or destroy all life as we know it. The Toad Sage looked at the still glaring Hokage without fear. I once taught a kid how to use the Rinnegan, and I learned so much about it that you can't even begin to understand it. But I'll do my best to break it down so it can get into your thick head. He spat, his eyes burning and his teeth clenching. Minato's jaw tightened up. Nagato had perfect control of his huge chakra reserves. He could easily control and master all 5 nature transformations, including the yin and yang release. Do you know how long it took Sarutobi-sensei to master all 5? He yelled, not waiting for an answer or caring if he got one. It took Sensei 10 years to really master it, but Nagato had already mastered all 5 before I met him. He was only 6 when I met him and the others. The Yondame's lips tightened and his eyes hardened as he continued to glare angrily at his teacher, who had ruined what he was doing by knocking the ink pot over his work. His Rinnegan could use 6 or 7 magical abilities that he called paths. Each one was overpowered at best and mid-S rank at worst. His fucking weakest attack was ripping out your soul. The younger Toad Summoner got up with a flourish and walked to another part of the library. Jiraiya ran after him quickly and persistently. If you think all of that is going to change my mind. Naruto's Rinnegan is much stronger than Nagato's. Jiraiya yelled as he threw his hands up in the air in frustration. This news made the king's father stop in his tracks and scowl over his shoulder. How do you know that? Why are you so sure? Jiraiya answered the questions with his own questions that he threw at them out of spite. Did you not watch the video or read the reports? What more proof do you need? Naruto can pop heads with just a thought. He put a strong hand on Minato's shoulder. Minato, listen to common sense. The blonde man shook off the white-haired man's hand and poked his fingers into the older man's chest. That shit stain is not a threat. He's just a pest that won't die, he said, pointing at himself and snarling. I will be the one to kill him. It looked like Jiraiya was about to blow up over his student, but he barely kept it together. And how do you plan to do that? The sage asked. Naruto can use all 6 paths, has perfect chakra control, can control all 5 nature transformations, has a naturally large chakra reserve, and he's mad as hell that you threw him to that damn snake. Then the sage remembered what had happened and his shoulders sagged as he thought about how bad things were getting in the world. You indirectly killed his sister. Everyone knows how much they loved each other, and it was clear. Jiraiya put his hands over his eyes and rubbed them, feeling regret rush over him like a herd of bulls. The kids had never done anything to him. In fact, whenever he saw them, they were always friendly. Even the people who were supposed to watch them, Shisui and Itachi, didn't want to be their friends, but the kids still smiled. The whole village avoided them, but the twins still smiled all the time. Even though the kids were picking on them, they kept smiling. They were so similar in how they did things that they might as well have been the same person. Jiraiya had plenty of chances to bring them closer, but instead, he just let his student throw them to the snake without thinking. The twins never asked to be friends with anyone. They had each other, and it was clear that that was more than enough. But Naruto was killed in the most painful way a child should ever have to go through, and Naruto had to watch. Minato watched the white-haired man for a few seconds before he turned to the shelf on his right and started looking through the books. If the village had treated them better, this whole threat to the whole world could have been stopped. The Yondaime said in a low, serious voice, "They are the reason why the woman I loved went crazy. Because of them, Junior doesn't have a mother." The wise man said, "No," and gave his student a disgusted look. "The person who unsealed the Kyuubi 16 years ago is to blame. The hate you have for those sweet children." He stopped at his own words, and his eyes drooped as he went on. "The hate you have for that boy and that girl is unfounded, pointless, useless, and disgusting. They didn't ask to be born. They didn't ask for that man to attack. They didn't even ask for the 9 tails. They were just born into your hate. Now Naruto is dead and Naruto has the Rinnegan. Face it, Minato. He is the child of hate." Minato could hear slow footsteps coming closer, but he didn't turn around. Instead, he kept his eyes on the books and kept his hands still on one about sealing away Daijutsu. The old ninja just said, the Toad Prophecy. Blood would soak the ground like a monster that not even the heavens could stop. The iron boots of the prophets of fate will make the earth shake. who serve the master of every path with loyalty, one who can make and break things, but will be a god of anger. The child of hate was made from the blood and light of demons. Everyone in the sky will bow down when they see him. Everything made sense now, Minato said coldly. I've never believed in prophecies anyway, as he took out the theoretical book on sealing away Daojutsu. Only a deep sigh came back. Let me kill him. Just send my message to all the countries that haven't signed his damned agreement scroll. The man looked at his student with sadness in his eyes. Hi, Lord Hokage, he said and started to leave, but he stopped and spoke without turning around. What about the Akatsuki? They already have 4-tailed beasts, and I think they're the ones who took the 2, 3, and 8-tailed beasts. That's a threat we can't ignore. The Yondaime didn't miss a chance to look at his old teacher, either. Right now, they're not nearly as important as the Tsukai Kingdom, and there he spat and ground his teeth. They're king. When we're done with them, we can return to the Akatsuki. Jiraiya nodded slowly and grumpily, and then he went off to do his new job, which was to convince other countries to join Konoha and Fire Country in fighting the Tsukai Kingdom. I have to figure out how to put a Hurricane seal on him. As he put his books on a different table, Minato thought his head would roll before he knows it. He took out a new sealing scroll, a pot of ink, and a brush, then started to review the more complicated parts of Fuinjutsu. It wasn't that he had forgotten. He wanted his son to die no matter what. There was no room for error. He had written to all the countries about getting together to fight the Tsukai Kingdom. Now, he had to wait for Jiraiya to come back and tell him what happened. 8 p.m. The hospital in Konoha for people who are dangerously crazy. Konoha Hospital. Country on fire. Naruto loved her twin brother Naruto very much. Not because she was related to him and thought she had to, but because she really liked him. Even if they were on opposite sides of the room, it would be clear to anyone who looked at them that they were related because they were identical twins. They were the same height, had almost the same body shape, wore the same size shoes, had the same shade of red hair, the same color of eyes, and, something that most identical twins don't have, the same mind. Even though there were small differences in how they acted or spoke, the twins were mostly the same person. Naruto's Rinnegan and the benefit of first absorbing Orochimaru's memories didn't make him suffer to train his body or mind. Even if he did, it wouldn't be obvious because the Asura path, which could improve his body, kept his body the same as every other average ninja, with the only difference being his black eyes with rings. Naruto was about the same size as Naruto, except that her shoulders were narrower and her hands and feet were a little smaller. You can't say enough about how focused they were. They could sit in a dark room and still find a way to talk for a long time in silence. Itachi, the quiet Uchiha, said that they acted like a married couple. Shisui, the silly Uchiha, said that their twin-ness was sometimes too creepy to handle. Both of the Uchiha twins' former babysitters were sure that the twins always held hands, but not with their bodies. Even worse, Shisui once yelled that they were born together. The red-haired twins ran silently down the squeaky-clean hallway of the psychiatric hospital, their arms flailing behind them as they kept their heads down and their eyes narrowed in concentration. Naruto was good at ninja and samurai arts because he had a stronger version of the most powerful Daojutsu. Naruto was able to keep up with her brother pretty well because even though she had been dead for 7 years, her mind and body still remembered training with their dead godfather. Because of the chemicals that were pumped into her, she could bench press 300 pounds when she was only 6 years old. She could, of course, keep up with her brother, but only to a certain point. Like her brother, her chakra and body were not like those of most people. Naruto was a mutant, just like her brother. Even so, there shouldn't be any confusion. Naruto wasn't nearly as strong as Naruto, but she wasn't even close to being weak. They broke into the psychiatric hospital at night because that's when the patients were put back in their rooms and security was mostly focused on the entrances and exits. The inside was mostly left alone and only patrolled every so often. The doors were all muffled, but that was because the patients were either strapped to their beds in straitjackets or wore mouth guards to keep them from biting their tongues or others. Naruto thought that the psychiatric institution back home was much better staffed and even more caring than the one in Konoha. It seemed like Konoha had given up on trying to bring people back to their senses. He felt warm eyes on him, so he turned to her and gave her a quick thumbs up. His black eyes with red rings glowed back at her. The building had 3 floors and stairs that went up in a zigzag pattern to connect them all. At the moment, the siblings were running quickly up the 2nd floor. They got in by putting on an illusion that made them look like employees. Naruto hissed softly and skidded to a stop behind a corner that led to a separate wing of the hospital for special patients. Her brother also stopped and hid across from her behind an open white janitor's room door. He looked at her, and she flashed him one finger, pointing it down to the ground and then over her shoulder. Naruto nodded. He knew there was only one person coming and that they should just get rid of him without killing him. Root was gone, Danzo was dead, and Tsunade was much easier to deal with than he thought. Jiraiya wouldn't be any different, but he still wanted Konoha to put up a fight that would at least keep him and his sister entertained. Naruto didn't really care. She was used to listening to what he said and doing it, with a few exceptions when they made plans without talking. Go get him. In the forest behind the academy, people could be heard panting quickly. 4 tiny feet moved quickly over the dry leaves, making the sound that their hunters used to find them. The 2 animals that were being chased hid behind a tree. They had to separate their hands, which were linked so they could hide behind 2 trees 3 feet apart. 2 bright purple eyes, as big as dinner plates and as scared as wild animals that have been trapped, found themselves and gulped. The man swallowed and tried to harden his eyes. His twin sister, the woman, saw his eyes and added her own courage to the courage he was trying to build. When you put all of this together, the twins were now looking at each other with cold, hard eyes. Naruto nodded, and the girl lightly closed her eyes, then opened them again, flashed 5 fingers on her left hand, closed her hand, and flashed 2 more fingers. 7 bullies. Naruto tapped his right fist twice on his left elbow, and the girl tapped her knees. In response, the boy tapped his neck, chin, and groin with a clenched fist. The girl shook in place, and Naruto sent the message again about how the attack would look from his side. The girl gave in the end. She didn't like getting kicked in the bathing suit area, but Naruto didn't care much about kicking groins. Naruto shook her head and clicked her heels together. Hidden above them, a pair of bright red sharing eyes furrowed as they tried to figure out what the twins' quick-fire messages meant. But they gave up and instead watched the plan they had agreed on play out. Itachi and Shisui were shown a secret language that only the 2 of them knew. They tried to figure out what it meant by comparing it to standard sign language, but they didn't get very far. Naruto and Naruto used their fingers to count down. 3, 2, 1. Naruto's right elbow shot out suddenly and hit the first bully in the stomach. He did it again, but this time behind the boy's head, which knocked him out. Even though the 3-year moves-olds were clumsy and sloppy, the Uchiha Jounin could not deny how well it worked to kill the 5-year-old. As Naruto got back on his feet, Naruto pushed her fist into the neck of another bully, dodged a blow, and punched the other bully in the chin. The leaves almost made the 3-year-old girl trip. But before she fell, she quickly pulled her foot up and hit a 4th bully in the groin. All 4 of them were out for the count, either in pain or dead. The twins' fists weren't even fully grown yet, so a punch from them should have been pretty mild. However, they had hit the children in places that hurt. Naruto tried to help his sister up, but the 5th and 6th bullies pushed him down again. The 7th bully ran back to the academy to tell the teachers that the twins were looking for trouble. Even though none of the kids were old enough to go to college, that didn't mean they couldn't hang out there after school. The twins with red hair tried to help each other get back up, but they were kicked in the sides. Naruto's head hit a tree trunk, and Naruto fought to get back to his feet so he could catch his sister before she fell. He grabbed the girl in his arms and rolled with her. Even when his back hit a strong root, he used his body to protect her. When the bullies laughed and came toward them, his arms didn't move. The red-haired girl on top of him closed her eyes and gripped his shirt tightly with her fists. She was trying to roll him over so she would be the one to get hit, but her brother gave her a strong look, which made her arms weaken. The boys got hit in return, and he wouldn't let them get to his sister. Before the 5th and 6th bullies could hit the younger kids anymore, the Uchiha jumped down and grabbed the twins. People might have thought of the twins as angels, but their children saw their red hair and strong bond as strange, and strange things were bad in their minds. The hallway was narrow enough for 3 average-sized men to walk through shoulder to shoulder, but only if their shoulders touched the wall. Naruto used one finger to point to his left foot and his upper back, and Naruto used her thumb to point to her groin and her neck. The twins' faces showed quick, nasty grins. Their plan was already made, and they both counted down in silence with their fingers. 3, 2, 1. Naruto slammed his foot down on the Chunin's guard, and Naruto slammed her fist into the poor man's groin. This made the ninja bend forward to grab his aching manhood, and that's when Naruto gave the Chunin a mind-numbing chop to his upper back, just under his neck. To finish it all off, Naruto brought her right knee up and hit the gasping older. They shared a strong fist bump and a sneaky grin. The girl told her brother, "Wicked." Naruto put her arm around Naruto's shoulder and told her brother something in a whisper. Separated by 7 years, Naruto finished by putting his arm over her shoulder and saying, "We're still in it." His Rinnegan told him there were no more guards, and as they stepped over the Chunin, he used his gravity control to move the man into the closet where the cleaners kept their things. "Why did you want us to be quiet again? Just the 2 of us can burn this village to the ground." his sister said as she pulled away from him, but only to hold his hand and look briefly into the small windows on the doors of each mental patient. She skipped around with joy and swung their hands between them, but Naruto chose to walk normally and use his Rinnegan to find the person he wanted to go to by following their chakra network. Even though she was in her body of a 16-year-old girl, she was still a 9-year-old trying to grow up fast for her brother. She still had her own habits. Naruto made a pouty face and nodded. "Trust me, sis, I know. No one has a chance against us, not even Dad." He looked at his sister and smiled sincerely as the happiness that had been filling his once empty soul poured out of his godly eyes. "But remember how we planned to bring the world to its knees and take Konoha last when we were staying with Godfather." The girl was sad, but she didn't stop skipping. I know, but I'm getting impatient, bro. Father is only a few hundred feet away right now. We can leave Konoha for now, but let's just cut off his head, please." Her eyes got bigger, and Naruto pulled her cheek with his free hand. "Trust me, sister, if we let him cook in his hatred and madness, it would be more fun to kill him," he said. She pouted, and the man patted her on the head. "Ice cream is still an option." She looked at him from behind her straight bangs. Naruto's smile twitched, and she sighed. "Fine." When they got to the last door on the second floor corridor, he stopped walking and she stopped skipping. Naruto and Naruko took deep breaths, and then Naruto raised his left hand and put it flat on the door. A seal matrix lit up with blue chakra, and Naruto's sister watched with interest as the seals moved at Naruto's mental command, moving aside and breaking apart until the door was free of seals and no alarm had gone off. The girl didn't know any seals or jutsu, so it was strange for her to see what her brother could do when he used the Rinnegan's ability to master ninja techniques to the fullest. The door clicked open, and Naruto opened it slowly. This time, Naruko was the one who had to protect her brother. The tears that had been on her cheeks had dried up, but they had left a trail down her dusty and dirty face. The girl's arms were wrapped around the body of one of her older twins, who was lying on her stomach and shivering like a leaf in a storm. His skin was a mottled gray color, with green spots under his eyes and on his fingernails. The boy was huddled up and shaking like he was in the middle of a terrible snowstorm. His eyes were tightly shut and hurting. The girl twin cried and hugged her brother closer, but her brother didn't move, as if she were trying to warm up a statue that was shaking. Naruto's turn had just come up. Their godfather had drawn a nature funneling seal in the middle of his back. This seal caused all of the nearby nature chakra to flow through him, do damage because he wasn't a sage, and come out of his fingers and toes, making them green. This made the 6-year-old boy's skin lose its color and turn a sickening shade of gray because the dangerous natural chakra took more from him than they could ever give him. Orochimaru put him in a coffin and buried it 6 feet underground in the middle of a lush meadow and grass country, a place where natural chakra could flow freely. Worst of all, no matter how badly the natural chakra tore his chakra system and nervous system apart, the Kyuubi chakra in him always found a way to fix it, even though it always used up the very few resources in the little boy's body. The cruel snake man said that the natural chakra would rip apart their nerve endings and train Naruto to never feel pain again. He still had to go through the same torture for 3 more weeks, and their godfather was looking forward to each day. The seal had been taken off for now, but it would be put back on by sunrise. Naruko sniffed and rocked back and forth, making her dirty brown dress rustle and the chains on the collars around their necks clink and clank against each other. People near the slaves' caves watched with sad eyes as a little girl tried to rock her brother to sleep while he was shaking. The little girl with red hair swallowed and tried to hum a song she could barely remember, something from a memory she couldn't remember ever happening. But it came out broken and tearful. Naruko stopped trying and just tightened her grip on her brother as a sound ninja passed by. She bared her teeth at the big smile he sent her before he left. The shaking didn't stop in Naruto. He coughed weakly, and his feet pushed him closer to the tiny spot of warmth, which was about the same size as him. However, his stiff arms couldn't move to wrap around the source of warmth to comfort her. When Naruko felt this, her big, bright purple eyes filled with tears again. "Sis, are you there?" He couldn't feel much under his body except the familiar warmth that wrapped around to caress his dying body. His nervous system was almost dead, but the Kyuubi chakra was healing it. The girl twin put her hair in a ponytail and then gently rubbed her brother on the back. "I'm here, bro." The man with red hair took a deep breath and tried to stop his terrible shaking, but he couldn't. Do you think Mom will love us?" was a big question that the twins hoped to solve one day. Their father hated everything about them, including the air they breathed. But they never knew a mother or their mother. Minato never brought her up without saying that she was where she was because of them. They were still kids and didn't know that Kushina had gone crazy after losing the Kyuubi. How could they have known that if no one told them? Still, they kept hoping and hoping and hoping that at least one person in the world would love them. During their time in Konoha, the siblings never went out of their way to make friends because most people avoided them. They didn't know what love was until they found each other. Naruto ran her fingers through the hair of her brother, who had dirt in it. I love you, bro. When Naruto's body moved a little, even though he was shaking, her lips twitched, and he let out a tight, light laugh that stopped when he coughed. I know, sister, but mother. His green fingers flexed and grabbed the clothes around her knees, clenching and releasing as if they were spasming. What if mom? The girl with red hair didn't want to let her brother down by saying she didn't know. There were times when the truth had to be told, even if it would bring them down. But at the moment, Naruto only knew how to show her brother as much love as she could. That meant giving him the answers he wanted. Yes, bro, mom will love us, he said. Naruto smiled down at his knees while still holding onto her clothes with his life. As her soft fingers moved through his hair, it made his eyelids feel heavy. Thanks sis. Don't forget, bro, Naruto said as she shuffled to the ground and wrapped her thin arms around his body. She pulled his head to her chest and put her chin on his head. I love you, Naruto, more than the stars in the sky or the sands in the desert. Naruto's shivering stopped a little bit, and he tightened his grip on the cloth around her belly. His eyes were squeezed shut and filled with tears. I love you too, Naruto. Naruto swallowed hard when a soothing hand grabbed her left hand and pulled her out of the painful memory. Her shoulders shook as she took a deep breath. Naruto looked at her with concern, but she looked back at him and gave him a soft smile, which made him smile as well. The twins looked at the person in front of them again. It was a woman with red hair as long as Naruto's, down to her lower back, and a smaller, less healthy body than when she was at her best. Her arms were tightly wrapped around her torso by a white, seal-reinforced straitjacket and baggy black pants. The woman had no shoes on, just like Naruto. The twins were 5'5" tall, but the woman, with her sickly pale skin, wild bloodshot eyes, and hunched shoulders, like she was having a secret conversation with herself, looked to be no more than 5'8". The woman was sitting on her bottom in the far right corner of the room, rocking back and forth and humming a scratchy tune, hissing in frustration when she got it wrong but still managing to keep going. The red-headed female twin tightly pursed her lips, but the tension in her body went away when Naruto's hold on her got tighter. This reminded her that he was still there with her and that he was going through the same tornado of mixed feelings about what they were seeing. The crazy woman was humming a song and muttering parts of it that mostly didn't make sense. It was the same song that Naruto tried to hum back to Naruto when he might have been feeling the worst, just to cheer him up. One of their father's students, Kakashi Hadake, said that his sensei, Minato, once told him that when he and Jiraiya went back to the hospital to get the twins and seal the Kyuubi, they found the woman huddled in the corner of the room, surrounded by the bloody bodies of her guards and the maternity nurses. She was holding tightly onto the silent twins she had just given birth to. Her eyes were wide and she looked crazy. She was gritting her teeth to keep from biting down on her own children in a bloody rage and killing them. She had been trying, with clenched teeth, to sing the same song to the wide-eyed, curious babies. The woman's arms twitched and her body shook heavily, but she wouldn't let the madness in her head make her kill her children. Kushina whispered as she rocked back and forth, "Mommy loves you, my sweet babies. Mommy loves you, my perfect darlings. Mommy loves you, my shining stars. My loves you because mommy loves you." Sometimes she rocked too hard and her forehead hit the soft, white wall. She squeezed her red-eyed, sleep-deprived eyes shut and hummed a song out of tune, coughing and spitting when it got too rough to keep going and starting over. "Mommy loves you, my sweet babies. Mommy ma babies," she swore and tried again. The bandages on her toes had been thrown away for a long time. Since she was 16, she had been humming that song. Neither of the twins liked what they saw. They didn't cry at all. They didn't know their mother, so even though they were pretty sure Kushina loved them or still did, they didn't know her well enough to be sad about her love for them being gone. The twins with red hair knew what would happen if they found out Kushina didn't love them. A look between them showed that they both knew what would happen in the end. They would kill her. It wasn't much proof, but it would have to do until they found a way to bring their mother back to normal. The girl twin saw her brother nod as he looked at their crazy mother, so she nodded back and raised her right hand, pointing 4 fingers at Kushina with her thumb on her palm. The muscles in her raised hand tightened, and the light green glow of her fingernails made a small but noticeable burst of chakra before her nails shot out of her fingers and hit the former Kunoichi in the neck while he was distracted. When the alarms went off, the woman slumped forward, and the seals around the room could feel a burst of chakra. Blue is a hallucinogen, and green is a heavy tranquilizer. It won't kill you, the girl whispered as she looked at her mother's limp body. The dangerous ones are orange and red. Naruto nodded and took note of the fact that she was a mutant. Naruto could take on some of the traits of a fox, just like the head of the Inventions Division. Nirvana Kirigoku could take on some of the traits of a rainbow Komodo dragon of Spring Country. Her head would grow ears, her nails would get longer, and her eyes would change from human to wolf-like. Her brother, on the other hand, could grow from 1 to 9 tails and change the color of the skin around his eyes to orange if he used his mutant abilities, which came from his mutated Kyuubi and normal chakra. There would be no bad effects on their skeletons, other than the fact that their bones would be stronger than usual. The twins could feel that there were many chakra signatures getting closer to their mother's room, so they put their hands apart. Naruto walked up to their mother and hesitantly lifted her onto her shoulders, while Naruto took a 2-foot-long piece of deep red cloth out of his pants pocket. He unrolled it to show that the word sky was written in gold on the cloth. He put the small flag of the Tsukai Kingdom in the middle of the room and shut the door just as the first ninja came around the corner, and started running toward them. The king of the Renegades put his right arm on the Super Seal-supported wall across from the door that led outside. Great push. As his Rinnegan pulsed after the words, they were low and scary. Crack. Boom. The whole wall of Yondame's wife's room exploded outward, and the female twin laughed, impressed at the feat. Naruto couldn't help but rub his fingernails against his shirt. The drill-beaked bird flew down from the sky and flapped its wings outside the room, making a horrible shriek and a loud whooshing sound. Naruto had told the creature to fly in circles in the sky for a few minutes, but now it was going to do something useful. The girl with red hair jumped onto the bird, and Naruto did the same. The teen's Rinnegan could see very well through the animal's eyes, but he couldn't control it. However, he still had ultimate control over all the animal summons, so it was almost pointless for him to be able to control the animal like a device, since he could just as easily command them mentally or verbally. When the keys didn't work, strong shoulders started banging on the door of the room they had just jumped out of. "Hold on," he said, and Naruto bent her knees and gently put their mother, who had been put to sleep, on the bird's back. She quickly sat down next to Kushina and tightened her grip on the limp woman. Naruto told the bird when he was sure that she was safe. "Hokage Mountain. Screeya." The bird called out and flapped its big wings twice before flying straight to the monument. When they saw a lot of wind chakra flash from the Hokage's mansion to the mental facility, their black eyes with red rings turned bright purple, and their excitement shone between them. He was their dad. Their bodies were on edge, and they so badly wanted to fly back and kill him. But they stayed strong. If they wiped out the other nations, it would make Konoha even more worried. Even so, Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Why is there a mountain there?" The fast bird landed on the head of the Nidaime Hokage. It took 4 steps forward before stopping, flapping its wings a lot to slow down from its fast flight. The girl watched as Naruto flew down gently, and she waved her hand. He helped her get down by lifting her up and dropping her next to him, and their mother did the same. "I want to take my mother home." Naruto nodded. She knew that home meant the kingdom of the Tsukai, so her eyebrows went up. "How can that be? I thought you said home was all the way south of Kumo." Naruto tried not to smile as he didn't answer her. Instead, he tapped his right ear, the earbud clicked, and he said, "Please put me in touch with Nora, who is in charge of scout and retrieval." "I'll make it up to you, my lord." His twin sister cried when he didn't pay attention to her. "Bro." He gave a small smile and spoke when he heard back. "Send a stealth retrieval vehicle to my location." A stealth vehicle was a sleeker version of the normal retrieval vehicle. Instead of carrying and protecting the transport of dozens of soldiers, it could take about 30 at a time and moved almost silently, making it hard to see, especially at night. The king of the kingdom said that each vehicle should always have 3 people from the medical division and 4 of their best retrieval guard soldiers. Nora, who wore a black mask and was in charge of the scouts and retrievers division, said, "Right away, my king." She did this with a deep bow. She was still in her office, sorting through the names of people between the ages of 1 and 6 who might be the new Jinchuriki of the 3-tailed turtle. She worked with Meiji Haruhi Gamatomo, who was in charge of Fuinjutsu, and Hamato Toshi, who was in charge of intelligence and interrogation. During the attack on Water Country, Naruto told the retrieval division of the kingdom to get the tailed beast. It happened when the daimyo was being put down. The loyal until death woman jumped over her desk and yelled for an SV to be ready away from the earbud. "In 4 minutes, sir, I'll be there." The king said, "Take your time," then cut the connection as the woman ran out of her office and into the large storage room with about 100 different kinds of retrieval vehicles, from the ones used to bring back Sukai soldiers to the ones used to bring back grounders like Yujito and Karabi. As she jumped into the driver's seat, she spoke into her earbud to tell Stealth Vehicle 1 to start getting ready for takeoff. People rushed in, and the roof of the Scout and Retrieval Division headquarters opened up. This let the vehicle fly up with its powerful and well-hidden engines, and it shot into the night sky with a flash of blue fire. Nora pushed 3 buttons on her dashboard, and the car glowed, making it look like it was part of the night sky. But Naruto was smiling at his sister, who was pouting. "I wasn't kidding when I said that our home is the most advanced place on the planet. And she'll be here in 4 minutes. How is that even possible, bro? Kumo is miles away from here." He tapped her nose and said, "Through the power of hard work, new engineering, and seals. Now we have to worry about the Konoha ninjas getting here before the vehicle does." Not to mention that he could just fly and put his mother in the stealth vehicle. It didn't have to land. But what would be the fun in that? "They have Ninken trying to find us," the person with the Rinnegan said as he looked through the eyes of a wall gecko that was lying on the wall just below the broken wall. He had the same eyes as the tiny creature. He had called it to watch the ninjas carefully before he and his sister took off with the bird. The girl thought it was. She didn't know much about the legendary eyes, but her brother told her little by little what it could do, like bring the dead back to life. "I still think this village should be blown to the moon." "Hold on, sister," he said in his mind, and the bird squawked in agreement. He pinched her cheeks and said, "Why don't you go kill the people who come while we wait? Would that make you feel better?" She rolled her eyes and pushed his hands away. "For now," she said as she jogged steadily toward the approaching Konoha ninjas. Her face changed slowly as she began to use her mutant powers. "Don't forget, the vehicle will be here in 2 minutes," he called after her. "More than enough time," she said. The ears on the side of her head pulled in, and 2 red fox ears popped out on the top. Her long red hair covered the places where her human ears used to be. Her fingernails grew to be about 4 inches long, and the nails on her bare feet grew to be about the same length. She might not have known a lot of jutsus because her training, torture had mostly focused on improving her physical strength, flexibility, agility, and intelligence, but she was more than enough to handle the Jounin who was coming. Her senses told her there were 8 Ninken, but only 2 of them started barking wildly when they smelled fox in the air. This was a smell that only people with a good sense of smell could pick up on. Her long nails turned silver, and as she ran toward them, she rubbed them together, making white and red sparks fly off of them. Her godfather had called them adamantium bones. He said that he had taken the DNA of a dead bone pulse user and changed it with the magnetic release of Sunagakure so that she could grow more metal claws from other places. Even though the girl liked the traditional, wild animal claws better than the ones that came out of her fists or knees and elbows. When the first ninja saw her, it was too late. She pounced on him and used his mouth, which was open because he thought she was Kushina Uzumaki, as a stepping stone to dive on those behind him. Her metal toenails broke out of the back of his neck and killed him as she carefully removed her foot before he could fall and spun in the air to get away. As she fell, her nails ran down a ninja's face, and she backflipped under a Ninken, grabbing its tail so it couldn't run away. She then used the poor dog as a bat to hit the ninja's handler in the face. She killed the creature by slamming it into the ground, and she killed the Inuzuka partner by cutting all 5 of her fingers off under his chin, and then extending her nails to pierce his brain. She didn't stop moving for a second as she gave a woman a brutal right hook and punched her fists into the stomach of another ninja. She ripped his small intestine out in a shower of blood and tied it around the neck of a shinobi who tried to tackle her, pulling it down to smash his face with her knee. Naruto took the bloody intestine in her hands and swung it at the last ninja, using the dead body hanging from it as a club. The ninja hit 3 trees before finally coming to a stop in a ditch. The girl put the organ on the ground and blew out her hair to move a bang that was touching her lips. She turned to Naruto and smiled proudly at his nod of mild amazement as she ran to him, her face smoothing out until it looked like it did before. "If I didn't know better, I wouldn't think she died just yesterday." He held up his right hand, and she gave him a high five with her left hand. 7 years with the Shinigami, and she still knows how to fight, he said as he watched her slump against the drill-beaked bird and gasp for air. That was amazing. She waved her hand and said, "Oh, stop, you're making me blush." Their godfather had been training them to be better ninjas for Konoha. This meant that they had to do painful exercises, get injected with chemicals, and fight with sound ninjas. You could say that Naruto's Rin Rebirth technique is a perfect copy of the Impure World Resurrection technique. Naruto was brought back by the non-Rinnegan Jutsu, but instead of only having half of her strength, she was able to remember all of her physical and mental training. The only small problem was that even though she was 16, she still had the mind of a 9-year-old because she had died when she was 9 and come back to life when she was 16. Even so, this didn't make it too hard to raise the twins because any child who survived a month in the slave pens of Hidden Sound was no longer a child. They had to grow up fast or die even faster. It was like the red light district in Konoha, but there wasn't any fighting between the people there. When Naruto heard a low whistle, he looked up, and a dark mass fell down softly in front of him. The driver jumped out the window and gave the stealth vehicle's retrieval captain the wheel. Nora, who was wearing a mask and was in charge of a group, got down on her knees in front of Naruto and put her right hand over her heart. Division Head Nora of Scout and Retrieval reporting. "My Lord Naruto," she said in a low, polite voice, with her head tilted down and her whole body in the respectfully submissive position that all Tsukai soldiers were taught to do in front of Naruto, their ultimate master. "Please help me get my mother and sister back home," he said, nodding at Kushina, who was still lying on the ground, and Naruto, who jumped up and yelled, "What?" Nora too suddenly looked up and gaped at the red-haired girl who stomped over to her king. She looked just like her master, except for a few small things that made her look more feminine. Seeing the girl proved that she and her master were one and the same. "Is this Lady Naruto, my king's sister?" Nora asked in a shaking voice. She was so close to getting up and kneeling before the girl that she had to stop herself. "Yes, Nora, this is my sister Naruto." "Naruto, this is Nora, head of the Scout and Retrieval Division." His sister nodded politely to the older woman, but she gasped when Nora moved closer and bowed deeply, putting her forehead on the ground. "It's an honor to meet my lord's sister. I feel very low." No, it's fine. Please stand up." The girl stopped her angry yell at her brother when her brother said, No, it's fine. Please stand up." When Naruto called to say that Kushina wasn't in the best of health, the doctors were putting her on a stretcher and tying her down. They were also making sure that there was a steady flow of mild sedatives in case the woman woke up. His sister spun him around and poked him in the chest with her finger. "And where do you plan to go?" "Hidden Rain. I need to take care of a few things there." She stiffly crossed her arms. "I'm going, too." Her purple eyes darted over his shoulder as the doctors put the stretcher on wheels and began carefully moving their mother over the uneven, rocky ground on top of the monument. This was their king's mother, so they had to be extra careful. Naruto rubbed his face with his palm and sighed deeply. "Sis, I know we still have a lot to catch up on, but this mission is very, very important and I want to finish it quickly so I can go home." After Naruto changed what he said, she narrowed her eyes, and a big drop of sweat grew on the side of his face. "Are you saying that I'm a burden?" she asked, balling her hands and tightening her shoulders. "Come on, sister, you know you're not a burden." From what he could see, even if they were Chunin trackers, she could easily hold her own. Talking about trackers, the village was on fire. The psychiatric ward's alarms were going off, and he could feel chaos as people spread out to find the missing patient. "Then it's settled. I'll come with you," she said, and then she gave him a dirty look. "And if you dare try to knock me out," she said. But Naruto laughed and nodded. She pumped her fist to her side to show how successful she was. "Is there any extra armor in the car?" the king asked the woman, who was still on her knees. Even though she was told to stand up, Nora stayed on her knees because she was near the two redheads who had affected her life, and the lives of thousands of other people, either directly or indirectly. When she heard the question, the woman shook. "I'm sorry, my lord, I didn't know." "It's okay. I should have known she would want to come along." When he gave her a mild glare, his sister winked. She said without hesitation, "If you want, my king, I will take off my own armor and give it to my lady Naruto." Naruto gave a small frown and shook his head. He told me firmly, "Your armor shows your rank, and you should wear it with pride." She earned the platinum rank, which is the only rank right below the king's obsidian rank. The woman had worked hard to move up the ranks, and Naruto didn't like the idea of someone giving up their rank, even for a short time. "As usual, my lord, you are right. If it's okay with you, I'd like to know if there are any underwear or shoes in there." She gave Naruto a cold look, and he winked back. "My brother didn't seem to give me any," she said. Plus, both her clothes and hands were covered in blood. "I thought you would have liked having your own space. Privacy. Between you and me." "What does that mean?" "I really don't know what privacy between us means," she teased, jabbing his arm with her elbow and moving her eyebrows playfully. After just a few seconds, Naruto pursed his lips and nodded his head to show that he agreed. They didn't know what it meant for them to be alone. When they were in Konoha and even when they were outside of Konoha, they shared almost everything. Why would that change now or in the near future? Yes, ma'am, we do have extra clothes and gear in the stealth vehicle, she said. Perfect. Go get her the clothes, Naruto said, but his words got slower and slower until he stopped talking. His senses were heightened, and his godly Rinnegan lit up. Slowly, the world around his eyes came to a stop. The teen, who was still moving normally, narrowed his eyes and looked around. Nora and Naruto had stopped moving and were staring at him as he spoke. His eyes saw and processed things much faster than any normal person could. He turned his head to where he felt danger and walked over to the retrieval vehicle to get to his mother's stretcher, which was strapped down so it wouldn't move around when the vehicle was flying. He had to go through the huge open back door. The medics and retrievers were sitting on the seats and chatting, but they were not moving at the moment because Naruto was walking faster than any normal person could understand. He stopped next to her and frowned at the seal on her forehead that was lit up. The god seal of flying thunder. Even though he could see quickly, he could still see the seal slowly getting brighter. This showed how fast the legendary S-rank seal was. In a small puff of smoke, Naruto took a scroll about the size of his palm from his wrist and put it over the seal on Kushina's forehead. On the back of the paper, there was a seal written in gold, followed by another kanji written in red. And the last one was written in black. It was called the Fuinjutsu Absorption Seal, and its main purpose was to transfer the contents of one storage seal to a piece of paper, copy the same seal onto the paper, and transfer it there. However, it could also copy seals on the paper and absorb the copied seal, but this meant that it could only be used once. The deputy head of the division made the Fuinjutsu division to deal with the threat of trap seals. The Rinnegan King grabbed the successfully copied Hurricane seal, crumpled it in his hand, and set it on fire. This stopped Minato from getting to where they were before he could flash there. The Yondaime was suddenly thrown back into Kushina's old room by a swirling vortex he had briefly entered. His cloak was burned at the sleeves, and there was soot in his blonde hair. While his ninjas ran to him to find out what had happened, Naruto walked back to his sister who had been frozen in time and his subordinate who was wearing a mask. He gave his eyes time to move normally again, and when they did, the two looked at him sharply. He told them, "They'll be here in 2 minutes," and led them to the car. He snapped his fingers and didn't pay attention to the soldiers in the car who stood up to salute, then dropped to their knees, put their hands over their hearts, and lowered their heads. Nora ran to the seat right behind the driver and hit it. There were 30 seats in the car. It lifted up to show a neat black duffel bag. She pulled it out, put the seat back in place, and ran back to Naruto. She gave it to Naruto with a bow, and the girl took it politely even though she was still shocked by how well she was being treated. Tell Karin, the head of the medical division's division, to put our mother in a safe room, care for her well, and start treatment. Karin was a great doctor. Not only did the kingdom have great advances in technology, Fuinjutsu, and civilization, but their medical field was also a big step up from what could be seen on the ground. There was a way to help people who had lost their minds get better, but Naruto's mother was a little different. As soon as our mother is safe, tell the head of the Fuinjutsu division, Meiji, to start fixing the broken seal shackles. As Naruto and his sister got out of the car, Nora said, "Yes, sir," and saluted. She was holding the duffel bag with extra clothes and gear in both hands. "Good luck, sir," she said before slamming her right fist 3 times into the door of the driver's side of the car. The retrieval vehicle started to lift off the ground. As they kept going up into the sky, the wide open back started to close. The king and his sister kept an eye on the vehicle as it went up. When it reached the sky, it merged with it and flew back to the Tsukai kingdom. "Now what? I was thinking we should spend the night in the hideout of one of my spies near the capital of the Fire Country before we go to the Rain Country," he said. He had gravity pick up the Rinnegan King and take Naruto up with it. Then, with a loud thud of wind, he blasted them both towards the capital. The startled girl had no idea how they would get there. The bird was sent back to the realm of summoning, which was fine because it had done what it was supposed to do. The red-haired twins left the village in a complete state of emergency, terror, panic, and paranoia. Underground Akatsuki meeting room. The Tower of Ankage. Imagakure no Sato. There were 3 Tsukai spies in the Akatsuki. 2 of them had switched sides in the same way, and the third had been a spy for a much longer time. As the leader of the S-rank organization spoke, one of the Tsukai spies narrowed his eyes and thought back to when the legendary king of the Tsukai kingdom had hired him. 5 years ago, when the godly boy was only 11, he was a remarkable person. Art was something that would last forever and ever, that could not be changed or destroyed. Since the day he started learning puppetry from Lady Chiyo, that's how Sasori of the Red Sands lived his life. Art was beautiful. Art was always there. Art was always there. Art could not die. A low voice said over his broken body, I hear you are a great spy master. The redhead's eyes flickered open, and he tried to move, but every joint in his arms and legs was stuck with a solid black rod. His chakra hurt because the rods were in the way. The S-rank missing ninja saw that he was still wearing his normal clothes, except for the tears from the black chakra rods. He then realized that after 5 minutes of constant effort, he had been easily beaten by this person without much effort. He thought that the person had even let him attack in order to show him that it would never work. The puppet man was in mountain country looking for a mountain lion that he thought would be a great addition to his arsenal. When he climbed into a cave on the side of a mountain where locals said the animal lived, he found a calm red-haired child sitting on the bleeding body of the lion he was looking for. After that, he let all of his anger from searching for weeks pour out through his puppets. At least 50 of these black rods were used to nail the Kazekage puppet to the ceiling of the cave. His Haruko puppet was in pieces at the back of the cave. It had been crushed by an invisible force, but the puppet man inside was able to escape before he was crushed along with it. All 100 puppets from his 100 puppet technique were nailed to the walls and floor of the cave with at least one rod, as if they were just decorations to the boy. He had been beaten like a child by a child. He had been dragged to the boy by a strong pulling force and slammed into the ground with a choke slam that would have killed any other living thing. Even though he was made of wood and couldn't feel anything, he knew that the mountain bowed as his back hit the ground. He was then quickly pierced with the rods, which stopped him from using his chakra. Sasori just hummed and looked up. His eyes collided with a pair of orbs that had so much power that they stopped the puppet master's mind from thinking. His light brown eyes slowly got bigger and the mouth on his puppet fell open, coal black with red rings and a circle around it. Even though it was dark in the cave, the face was so white and clean that it shone. Red hair that looked like it was moving in the wind that wasn't there. At the same time, he was emotionless and cold, but he gave off an air of power and demanded respect. After staring at this godly child for 5 long minutes, the famous puppet master could only say, "You or dot." When the boy narrowed his eyes, Sasori was afraid for the first time in years. He squeezed his eyes shut and spoke in a whisper. "You are beauty you are perfect you or . After that, the person stopped talking. He said it again. "I've heard you're a great spy." The puppet man eagerly nodded and said, "Yes, my lord. The best on the continent." His once dead eyes lit up at the praise. "How can I help you, my lord?" Naruto's lips moved in a tiny way that was hard to see. "I want you to keep an eye on things and tell me what's going on." Then, Sasori thought right away that the boy was a god. "I'll do anything to make my lord happy." It was important to protect the perfect art, and as long as he lives, he will do everything in his power to protect those interests. "Good. I'll talk to you soon." The person stood up straight and got ready to leave. He lifted his feet off the ground and got ready to shoot into the sky, but the red-haired puppet man yelled quickly and stopped him. "My lord, if I may be so bold, what is your name?" When the person looked down at him, Sasori instinctively dropped to his knees, put his right hand over his heart, and lowered his head. "My name is Naruto, and I am the king of the kingdom of Tsukai." 2 years later, he was invited to the big kingdom in the sky, which made the puppet man feel even more humbled that he had been lucky enough to get the king's attention. He became the second in command of espionage and infiltration, which was led by Yua Kuso. He had also given the red-headed puppet man a gold rank in armor, which he wore proudly under his Akatsuki robes. Even though his armor couldn't be broken, it didn't stop him from making strings for puppets. He told his new boss about everything. As soon as he heard there was a S-rank organization and that he had been invited to join the higher ranks, he told Naruto and asked what to do next. He didn't get his gold rank for another year. He was told to agree, and a few months later, 2 spies from the kingdom of Tsukai were added to the Akatsuki. Nagato asked him from his throne at the front of the room, "Sasori, what have your spies told you about this growing threat? The kingdom hidden in the sky." Konan stood next to her childhood friend, and like everyone else, she looked at Sasori. The rogue organization's most important source of information was the spy master. Gold-level spy with red hair hummed from inside his Haruko puppet. "A spy in Kumo told me that the king and his forces marched into the village without being seen and took control of it before the Raikage noticed." The leader of the group and the Angel of Aim remained calm, but some of the others looked a little surprised. Sasori continued. "About 5,000 Tsukai forces showed up, but only 1,000 of them actually took over. An informant told me that they were all at least Jounin rank," he said, leaving them to figure out what he meant. "From what I've heard, their armor is impossible to break through, their skills are unmatched, and their king the puppet master stopped. not sure if he should go on or not. Itachi spoke up for the first time since the meeting started. Yes, what about their king? The wooden man kept quiet, but he spoke up when he remembered a command from the head of intelligence and interrogation. Tell them who we are and how strong our great king is. The king of the Sukai kingdom has the Rinnegan, he said, and everyone just stared at him in shock. So far, his words and the people he knew had helped the organization, but to say that the king of the Sukai kingdom had a Rinnegan was too far-fetched. But his eyes, I'm sorry, leader, but his eyes are much stronger than yours. His puppet passed a picture of the king to the leader's right, and Nagato narrowed his eyes at the picture of Naruto holding the Raikage by the neck and floating above the village while holding the king by the neck. Before the Sukai left, a bronze-level hunter ninja took the picture and gave it to the puppet man's spy, Kisame coughed to hold back his laugh. How can two Rinnegan exist at the same time? I don't know. All I can say is that he might have had the genes to make the eyes work. But I don't know what those genes are. Kekuzu then asked a question of his own. How do you know he has better eyes than leader, other than just looking at it? Sasori said, putting more emphasis on his words. Even though the black rings with red edges looked scarier than the purple rings with black edges, he knew they needed more proof. My sources in Spring told me that he could grab the daimyo's neck from a few feet away. That's not evidence. Without giving it much thought, he was able to crush the heads of her ninjas. The members didn't know the full power of the Rinnegan, so even if Sasori kept telling them what he saw, they might not believe him. Still, if he could do that, who was to say that they wouldn't lose if they went up against him? They will soon know art, he said, and he and the other two spies exchanged secret looks. Most of them didn't know that the next day, the king of the Sukai kingdom and his sister who had been brought back to life would come to the Rain village. He told Sasori to keep them all in the village until he got there, while he and his sister hid out with the spymaster in Fire Country. Albedo stood at the far end of the meeting, across from Zetsu and next to Deidara, who stood next to Sasori. He tried hard not to smile. If this king's Rinnegan is stronger than Nagato's, I won't need him anymore, he said, clenching his hands to hold back his excitement. And I can also have his army. Katametsukami is a very powerful jutsu.
So this was it for today. I will continue this story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.